The wind came down off the Sangre de Cristo Mountains like a living thing, sharp enough to cut a man's thoughts in half. It was late October 1887, and the high plains of Colorado were already turning iron gray under the threat of an early winter. Elijah McAllister stood on the porch of his ranch house, coat collar turned up, watching the last of his cattle bunch against the corral fence. 3 years of drought had left him with half the herd he once ran, a stack of unpaid notes at the Trinidad Bank, and a quiet that pressed on him heavier than any blizzard. He was 34, tall, raw-boned, with hands that looked older than the rest of him. Folks said he had a face like a rocky hillside, nothing soft, nothing giving. He hadn't smiled easy since his parents died of fever when he was 19, and he hadn't spoken to a woman longer than it took to buy coffee or sell a steer in 6 years. The ranch was all he had, and the ranch was dying. That was why the letter from Kansas City lay open on the kitchen table like a loaded gun. He had answered an advertisement. Not in a newspaper. Elijah didn't hold with newspapers, but on a notice tacked to the wall of the land office in Trinidad. A man named Hargrove ran a matrimonial agency for serious gentlemen of the West seeking Christian wives. The notice promised women who were willing, modest, and prepared for frontier life. Elijah had stared at those words for a long time, then wrote a short letter and enclosed $25. Money he didn't have, along with the train fare. 3 weeks later, a second letter came. Miss Clara Whitcomb, age 24, orphan, seamstress by trade, accepted his proposal. She would arrive on the southbound from Denver on the 28th of October. The ticket was paid one way. If the arrangement did not suit, she would be sent back at Mr. McAllister's further expense. If it did suit, the marriage would take place immediately. And the $25 became her dowry, meaning, in plain words, Elijah had bought himself a wife. He hated how that sounded, even in his own head. "You paid for me," she said. Not accusing, not shy, just flat like reading the weather. $25 plus fare. Now finish it. Elijah felt heat crawl up his neck. "Ma'am." Clara, I ain't proud of how this started. But I gave my word, and I reckon you gave yours. We're married legal. The rest, we'll take as it comes." She studied him a long moment. "I've got no place else, Mr. McAllister, and you've got no help. That makes us even, far as I can see. But I'm nobody's purchase that gets set on a shelf. If I stay, I work. If I work, I eat at the table same as you. And if we share that bed back there, it'll be because we both decide it. Not because some Kansas City paper says so." He had never heard a woman speak so straight. It unsettled him worse than any coyote howl. "Fair enough," he said. The first weeks were harder than breaking a bronc with a bad heart. Clara could cook, sew, and keep a fire going. But she had never milked a cow, never wrangled a steer, never ridden anything wilder than a streetcar. The two hired men left from better. Days took one look at the city girl and smirked, behind their hands. Elijah sent them both packing with their wages and a warning about loose tongues. That left just the two of them against 600 acres. 300 half-starved cattle, and winter coming on like judgment. Clara learned fast out of pure spite. She split kindling until her palms bled, then wrapped them in rags and kept swinging the axe. She learned to milk the bony Jersey cow and didn't flinch when it kicked the bucket over. She rode double behind Elijah to check the herd, because there was only one saddle. Horse left after he sold the others, to pay the bank. Her hands froze to the reins. She never complained. At night, she slept on a pallet by the stove. Elijah took the barn loft. Neither spoke of changing it. One night in November, the first big storm hit. Snow came sideways, driven by a wind that screamed like a dying woman. Elijah was out until midnight trying to bring the cattle into the lee of the bluff. When he stumbled back inside, half frozen, Clara had coffee boiling and the stove roaring. She peeled his coat off him like he was a child, rubbed his hands between hers, forced hot coffee down him. "You'll kill yourself for those cows," she said. "They're all I got." She looked at him then with something fierce in her eyes. Not anymore. Something shifted after that night. Small things. She started leaving his plate on the table instead of hers by the stove. He started bringing in extra wood so she wouldn't have to go out in the dark. One evening he found her in the barn trying to curry the horse with the wrong side of the brush. Instead of laughing, he showed her how, standing behind her, his hand over hers on the handle. She didn't pull away. Winter clamped down hard. The cattle began to die. Elijah rode out every day counting losses, coming back hollow-eyed. One afternoon he found Clara in the corral trying to drag a dead steer away from the water trough so the others wouldn't bloat on it. She was crying, not from sorrow but fury, because the carcass was too heavy and the rope kept slipping. He jumped down, took the rope from her raw hands, and together they hauled the steer clear. When it was done, she stood there shaking, snow in her hair, face streaked with blood and tears. "I can't do this," she whispered. "I can't watch everything you worked for die." He pulled her against him without thinking. She was stiff at first. Then her arms came around his waist and she held on like a drowning woman. He felt her tremble all the way through his coat. "You already are doing it," he said into her hair. "And I ain't lost yet." That night she didn't make up her palate. When he came in from evening chores, she was standing by the bedroom door, lamp in her hand. "I'm tired of sleeping cold," she said. He looked at her a long time. Then he nodded. They were shy as children at first. He turned the lamp low. She kept her nightgown on until he touched the knotted ribbon at her throat with fingers. That shook worse than hers. When they finally lay together, it was careful, almost solemn, like two people keeping a promise neither had dared speak aloud. Afterward, she curled against his side, head on his shoulder, and he felt the last piece of the wall he'd built around himself crumble into dust. Spring came sudden and mean, bringing floods that turned the creeks to brown fury. One noon, the South Pasture Dam broke. Elijah and Clara worked waist-deep in icy water trying to save what cattle they could. A longhorn cow bogged down, bawling in terror. Elijah waded in to cut it free and the mud took him. Clara saw him go under. She didn't scream. She grabbed the lariat off his saddle, looped it under his arms while the cow thrashed beside them, and hauled him out inch by inch until he could get his feet under him again. When they staggered to the bank, she hit him once hard across the chest. "Don't you ever do that again?" she panted. "You hear me, Elijah McAllister? This ranch needs you. I need you." He caught her fist, pulled her close, and kissed her right there in the mud and the rain, with the cattle bawling around them. It was their first real kiss, tasting of blood and desperation and something that felt like hope. Summer burned the grass crisp, but the herd that survived was tougher, wilder. Elijah sold the culls and bought young heifers with the money. Clara planted a kitchen garden that actually grew. She laughed sometimes now, short, surprised bursts, like she'd forgotten she knew how. One August evening he came in from branding and found her on the porch snapping beans. The sun was setting red behind the Spanish peaks, painting her face gold. "I've been thinking," he said, leaning against the post. "Dangerous habit," she answered, but she was smiling. "I still owe you $25. Her hand stilled. "I aim to pay it," he went on, "with interest." He reached into his pocket and took out a folded paper. When he opened it, a thin gold chain slid into his palm, a locket small and perfect. "I had the assayer in Trinidad make it from the first gold I panned out of the creek when I was 17. Been carrying it all these years for I don't know what. Something I never thought I'd have." Clara stared at the locket, then at him. Her eyes filled so fast it hurt him to see. "Elijah, I paid for a wife," he said, voice rough. "But somewhere along the line I got given one. This here's to say the debt's square, and to say, I love you, Clara McAllister. I reckon I have near about since the night you pulled me out of the mud." She stood up so fast the bowl of beans tipped and scattered across the porch. Then she was in his arms, kissing him like the world was ending and beginning at the same time. Years later, when the ranch had grown fat again and their children ran wild through the corrals, old-timers in Trinidad would ask Clara how a city girl ever tamed Elijah McAllister. She would laugh and say, "He thinks he bought me for $25. Truth is, I was the one doing the buying. Took me a whole Colorado winter to pay the price, but he was worth every cent. And if Elijah was within earshot, he would tip his hat low so nobody saw the shine in his eyes, and mutter something about stubborn women and good bargains.